because gratefulness allows you to be present, appreciate what you have in this moment, because you might not have another moment.
I like this question.
This is episode 5 now I'm on. So you're on episode 5. Welcome.
Sweet.
So this is second interview, but 5th episode. So it should be good. But I know you guys obviously, and everyone who might be watching this knows, hopefully, you guys run your podcast, The Process. Obviously had a couple name changes. I'm sure mine will change a few times as well. But no, it's really cool. But I guess if it's cool with you guys, just intro yourselves a little bit, just so people know kind of where you're coming from and your background and stuff, and then we'll just dive straight in. If that's cool.
After you, Marco.
Oh, thanks. Have the old guy go first.
Yeah.
Thrown in at the deep end.
Let's see. I'm known on Facebook as L Marco, but L is not my real name. It wasn't like I was born and my parents like, let's call him L. L is a joke, ladies and gentlemen. All right. It was something that I did years ago, and now Facebook has not allowed me to change my name. So I'm stuck with it. So, anyways, joke's on me. I've been involved in the closing space now, going into my 3rd year. And I am a UCM alumni. I actually won the Sam Dubs Award a couple of years ago for being the best dressed guy in the space. Now there's some other stuff around it, but I forget. As you can see, I have this epic beard background. Oh my God, I don't even know where to begin, dude. I'm just here, man, like anyone else, just trying to figure it out, bro. All right. No. I'm a philosopher. I'm a jokester. I love to train. I'm very deep into my spiritual work. And as you can see, I'm well read. Actually, that's not true. There's like maybe half of those books I still have to finish up. But anyways, I do have a bad book collection habit. And Wesley and I have this really cool podcast that we've been running now for, I think, 12 weeks. And so, wow. Yes, it's called The Process. And
that's gone quick. That's gone quick.
It's gone quick. Yeah. I am a huge fan of Alan Watts. He's one of my favorite philosophers. I can listen to him all day long, and I'm heavily influenced by his perspective. So I think that's a good intro right there.
Awesome. Yeah, well said. I used to listen to Alan Watts when I was doing dishes when I was like 17, and just listen to his like hour and a half lectures. So yeah, Marco and I are buddies. We've been in the space together. I've been there about 2 years consistently. We both worked on 2 offers at this point together, and we've developed a really strong friendship, and we're both aligned a lot on our philosophies and values and things like that. And, you know, we have healthy debates from time to time. And so we thought it'd be a cool idea to just be like, well, let's give back to the community a little bit, but not even that, almost for ourselves. Kind of like Marcus Aurelius style, when he used to like reflect on his empire that he was building. And he didn't even know that the book was going to be published, Meditations, which is now like one of the most popular Stoic books of all time. And I was like, it'd be really cool if like we were almost just journaling in front of people and just like sharing our experiences and talking about what's working, what's not working, and what our feelings are. And so a lot of our episodes are really raw, but I think that's kind of unique because we're not trying to like peacock and look like, you know, we know what we're doing, because we're still figuring it out. But yeah, that's my basic background. Had a super weird childhood. I was homeschooled my whole life. So I was basically self-taught. Didn't think college was the path for me. So I kind of ventured into, at first, construction for 4 years right out of high school. And then I delved into sales because I wanted to learn a skill set that could be transferable, you know, with other things. So I'm just trying to build the building blocks as I go. And here I am. So
Awesome. That's great. I think for me, I was really excited to have you guys on as well and talk to you, because a lot of what, and you've both showcased it so naturally already, right, is just quoting like, here's Marcus Aurelius talking about this and here's Alan Watts talking about that. Like, I love the philosophical side of things, and not a lot of people talk about that side. So I was really interested in having you guys on, because that's something that I know me and Marco have obviously spoke about some of this as well in our own conversations. But that for me is like, I love that topic, like that whole thing. So I imagine that this episode will kind of go off the rails more towards that sort of theme. Right. But for you guys, because I was listening to your podcast the other day, the core values one. Um and for me, I'm at a point where I'm kind of rewriting a lot of mine. Right. I'm like rewriting my belief system almost, and I'm kind of going through a lot of different things. But I'm trying to do it slowly. My past is, oh, I'll take that on board and I'll just try and live with it. And then a month later, it's just gone. So I'm like kind of doing one thing at a time. Now, I obviously don't want to rehash your guys' episodes, but how important for you guys do you feel the core values, that sort of topic, that sort of thing actually is, just like for sales, for business, but also for personal life? Like, do you think that your core values are who you are in the industry as well? Or do you think that's a personal thing and there's a public show that you can put on? Is it meant to be the same? Like, what's your kind of take on that side of
Hmm.
things?
I like this question. Wesley, do you want to take a crack at it first?
Yeah, I was writing down some things when you were saying that because I was actually just on a ski trip with my brother-in-law driving like 8 hours, and we talked about, people live because I think philosophy, which Marco and I are really very much into, I think really all that is just trying to figure out, like trying to live an examined life, like trying to figure out what is the best way to like operate in this existence that we don't really know what it is, because I feel like people do things reactionary and they don't really know why they're doing it. And then when they're done with that path or they explore it to the nth degree, they're like, oh damn, I was doing that because I wanted status, or I was doing that because I you know, was seeking money or whatever. So it always interested me to think about the type of life I want, to really paint that picture and then to dissect it. Like, well, why is that important? Why would I need is that because I want, my friends to look at me a certain way, or is that because it would actually make me fulfilled? And you have to go down this philosophical journey as you like think about that, because it's really hard to figure out, well, what is it that what makes life actually worth living?
Mm.
And part of that is just the process of discovering that and just evolving as a person. And then you go into this weird mode where you're just trying to live every day, and it's less about the goals and it's more about the internal discovery. So I think to the core values question, like that is like literally the compass by which you can direct your ship, adjust your sails in the storm that is life, right? Because if you don't have that, Marco and I kind of like revealed that to ourselves in that podcast, is like we are kind of just aimlessly chasing carrots on sticks, and we don't really know
Mm.
why we're doing it, right? Like why um I think, and Marco, you probably know the guy, I think it was Socrates that said this. He's like, the more that I know, the more I realize I don't know, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Yep.
The wiser I've become, the
All,
stupider I realize.
yeah, simply, I mean, most succinctly is like, all I know is that I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I mean, you can kind of give your 2 cents on that, Marco, but that's what I would say is like the kind of the foundation of why core values are so important. Because I mean, otherwise, why, why else are you doing things?
Mm.
What else are you doing things for, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's so there's I was actually having this thought last night. So people talk about morning routines and stuff like that and how important they are. There's also, in my estimation, in my experience as well, how important a nighttime routine is as well.
Mm.
It's allowing to essentially, in some sense, just kind of let the day's collections go through, and you can just have some sort of thought process over it as I'm doing my yoga under the red light, kind of a thing, right? Getting ready for bed, trying to optimize my sleep as much as possible. And one of the things that came across my mind, one of the thoughts was um, the Spartan races that I've been getting into,
Mm.
and how you can either make a lot of fun of it, which I did before I got involved with it, where I was just like, huh, it's all these 9 to 5 pogues that are just showing up to do this thing to make themselves feel cool. And then there was the other perspective. That's the cynical perspective. And then there's the other perspective, which is the one of encouragement, going, how cool is it for these people to get together, to put themselves in a situation that they normally don't get to, and to show up and to do the best that they can and support each other? How rad is that?
Mm.
So if I want to, I can look at life as a dick all day long and shit on things and just right. Or I can see it from the other perspective and be like, man, how awesome is that? How cool is that? Right.
Mhm.
So really, where do I want to exist in? And I was a cynical fuck for a long time. I was a nihilist for a long time. My philosophical pursuits led me down other places that were pretty damn dark. Like for a while, I was reading the works of Anton LaVey and really getting into his philosophy. And for those who aren't familiar with who that is, he's the founder of the Church of Satan from back in the 60s. Now, of course, I'm sure people now are some people listening are going, "Oh my God!" And it's like, just calm down, get into that some other point. Just do your research on it. Eventually, I pulled out of that, and you can succumb to nihilism very easily, especially in this modern day life of ours that is just so convenient, so easy to exist in because of technology and everything that we've got going on, especially if you're in the Western world, right? And that's a consequence of our abundance and prosperity is what we've created for ourselves. It's now taken us further away from our more primitive roots, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And so then one of the reasons why I'm such a big proponent of exercise and spiritual work and energy work and things like that, because I feel like it gets you more in touch with these more I don't want to call them primitive roots, but more closer to our how do I say this? So like closer to our more natural selves, if you will, right?
It's interesting.
And
Yeah.
so then with philosophy, that's a practice in of itself, but not just an intellectual one. And we've talked about it before on our show in the process briefly about what philosophia meant back in the day. Philosophia, philo being the love of wisdom. Sophia, that's the name of a woman. And Sophia has been personified as a woman. And so if you think about generally what a philosopher was, it was a bunch of men talking about life, having these discussions about what is a good life, what is the best life. And part of that includes this like love for a woman that is wiser than you in some sense. And when I think about my own experiences, it kind of does make sense, because think about us men, especially when we're fueled by testosterone, how we're risk takers, how we were willing to do some dumb shit, and how in some sense a woman's a lot more calmer and chiller saying, hey, do you think that's a real good idea? And it's like, of course it is. And it's like off the battle.
Yeah.
So then, I know I've taken it a little bit off the rails here, and I wanted to bring it back to what we were originally talking about is core values. And that becomes as we've mentioned before, it becomes a compass, it becomes a guide stone, it becomes a standard, not an expectation, but a standard of oneself to work towards.
Yeah.
You're not gonna hit the mark 100% every single fucking time, and you got to allow yourself some grace and some love, and not beat yourself up for not fucking hitting the mark every single time. I think what's really more important than anything else is that idea of 1% improvements on a daily, and just showing up consistently, and just showing up. Right.
It's interesting. It's echoing a lot of what I've been thinking as well recently. I've got a few things. you gave me a lot, and I want to pick on things throughout what you've just said. So we may jump around a bit on this one, but I'll start backwards so I don't forget what I was going to say. The end part of like the 1% better. I'm recently reading, or I've just finished reading, Driven by Douglas Brackman. I don't know if you guys have read that one. Very good book. It talks about, basically he's trying to do a positive spin on ADD, basically, which is needed, right? Like a reframe of like ADHD and that side of things, and giving it the positive side rather than it seen as like an illness, right? Which is very apt for me, seeing as that's kind of what a lot of my life has been around for the last few years. When he talks about, so you said you said something about getting 1% better, and then you also said about like even if you miss the mark. And what I liked with what he tries to reframe people is what people he calls the driven. Um, so you can assign yourself to that group if you want to or not. But what he says they aim for is they always need that. They need that goal, right? And they're always their natural nature is to have a goal they're trying to hit, right? And they're always trying to do it. The problem is there is no actual goal. It's kind of arbitrary. So when you hit it, you're kind of like, oh, well, what do I do now? And it actually causes more issues. So what he talks about is um, getting better because there is no end to just getting better. It's not, and that was a big reframe for me because I've always like, oh, he was like, basically, he was saying, the goal, the truth doesn't lie in a poster board of like big houses, nice looking women. It's like, oh, when I get that, things will be better. He's like, the truth lies in just doing the process, basically, like going through it, not the result in itself. So that was really interesting. We can speak to some of that. But one question I had was, we're talking core values, we're talking about search of wisdom, we're talking about this. Where do you guys think this comes from? Because if you can create, so if you can create, and I guess this is like, you're probably going to pull out some Buddhism stuff or something out of this, I imagine, or something. But who's creating those core values, right? Because they're clearly not yours in that sense, right? Because you're creating core values. So if you can choose them, where do you think they come from? Like who's making that choice? Or like, you know what I mean? Like where do you kind of go with that? Is it like you can choose whatever you want, and so there is no set, or do you feel that it comes from like a personality? Someone will pick it because that's how they feel they were raised or something. Like where do you think those sort of things come from? And it's a kind of a, I mean, if you can answer this one, obviously it's not just meant to be a random question,
Yeah,
but you know what I mean? Like, what's your thoughts
it's a
on that, I
good
should
one.
say?
Yeah.
Not what's the answer.
Yeah, it's a good one, and I think that's why people need to invest more into philosophy and critical thinking,
Mm,
because it is an open-ended question, and I don't
mhm,
think anyone has the answer. I think there's a lot of different paths to truth, and there is we can kind of we know vaguely that there is a truth out there, like all the religions talked about it, but they even had a mystery element to it, like
mm,
the God that I was raised to believe, which I'm now kind of an agnostic atheist, but in the Christian religion, they called him Yahweh, and it used to be actually like a whisper because they didn't even know how to describe him. They didn't even think it was they should, because it's just like it's just so much so far beyond their understanding that they can't even describe it. So um I think I think you extract it, right? I think like if you think about like I don't know if you believe in evolution or whatever, right? There is no like perfect organism, right? There's only an organism that's most apt to fit said environment. And so I think Dr. David Buss, the psychologist or evolutionary biologist, he said it's not the organisms that are the strongest, fastest, smartest that survive. It's the ones that adapt the
mm,
quickest to their environment. So um, I think the game is really like again for you going back to like how do I live an examined life? And you need to figure out because we only have so many chips, right? Like we're all gonna die, unfortunately. Like at some point, let's say it's 80 years old, this clock is gonna be done. Like the timer's gonna go off and we're gonna be done. So our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to figure out what would make my life the most meaningful that it can be. And everybody comes out to different conclusions. I personally don't believe that there is this absolute um, answer to how to live the best life because there's a lot of paths that can work.
mm.
Um, but I do think it's our job as individuals to extract and adapt to the life that we're given and the circumstances we're in to create a story that's compelling enough to be like, wow, that was a real life worth living. But there's also an argument as well to being complacent, and I don't know if complacent is the right word, but content, right?
Mhm.
Where you could always have a better or a more ideal version that you could live, but to figure out how to be like grateful and enjoy your life as well. So again, all when you're examining these things, that's where you get your core values. Because Marcos might be like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna die, so let's just fucking send it. And that's hedonism, right? That's that philosophy. That's where that comes from. And so there's different core values than the core values of Stoics, where they're like, well, we should embrace virtue and use everything to empower us and kind of almost like pursue the obstacle instead of avoiding it. So don't know if that even answered the question or just opened up a more can of worms.
Well, like I said, it's not really a question to answer, is it? It's more just like you say, there is no end to it, but it just brings up interesting thoughts because it's like, well, if there is no core, like if you can choose, and if life, because I think it's interesting, right? And I don't know, I'm still, like I say, I'm still building out on my side of things, right? But it's interesting if you think that there's no full truth in that sense, like there's no end point, right? Apart from the fact that we die, then there is no life to look back on. So is life just figuring it out? And that is it. You know what I mean? Like there isn't a point where you go, I have figured it out, because there's no end point to it that you can figure out. So does it just, is that all it is? It is just figuring it out. And that's because this goes back to the Driven book as well, because what he does is, it's really interesting. I'm gonna have to go one time. He does a shooting meditation for people with ADHD. So you go there and he teaches you like a form of meditation that they've developed, whatever, I'm not sure on it, but then they take you to a shooting range, and in a weekend they teach you how to do things that like most professional shooters, should we call them, couldn't do, like after a long time, because it's about the intention with it. But he was like, the one of the last things they do is they have 5 targets at different ranges, and he's like, what's interesting to experience is as someone's shooting, as they get to the 3rd one that they've successfully hit, and then the 4th, it actually becomes harder to hit the 5th one, because the people are like, that's the end result I'm looking for, so I'm aiming for that 5th one. I want to be a solid 5 out of 5 or whatever. And he's like, what he's trying to teach them, and this is like part of the experience, is each shot is just a shot. It's not even in concession. It's not part of a bigger thing. It just is another shot. So it's like on the 5th shot, if you take out the fact that you've already done 4 perfect shots, and you just think the wind's blowing this way at this direction, it's going this speed, calm my breath and everything, is like that will get you that 5th shot. But if you're thinking of getting that 5th shot, you're very likely not going to. I just found that really interesting. And it's a similar sort of concept that you both kind of mentioned there, that like, yeah, I find this topic, and this is why I love it so much, but it's also why I have to be careful, because my brain works like that same way. Like I can go down some tunnels, you know what I mean? But no, it's just really fascinating.
It's you know, in the Zen tradition, they also have archery as a form of meditation. They the Zen is a very popular philosophy and spiritual movement that the samurai adopted, right? It became Renzai Zen, because Zen is very right here, right now. You don't need, think about it this way: you got Zen in one spectrum, and you got Tibetan Buddhism on the other. They're very different flavors of Buddhism, but they get you to the same place, but in different ways. Zen is very direct, where it's just like, no, by shooting example that you mentioned, right? It's just like, all right, take each shot. It's each moment. We're not worried about, this fifth one right here is the end goal. It's just here and now. You're constantly present. We're constantly in process. One of my favorite things to contemplate from time to time is that we are still the explosion of the Big Bang. We are still the Big Bang happening. Like we are still doing this. And as we're doing this, we're here doing this right now, the 3 of us. Every single thing, event in our lives, every single decision and choice that we made has led to this very moment in time. And then we're going to do other moments in time. And at some point, we'll probably come back and whatever. And yes, that one day we will die. One day we're going to die. That is an absolute fucking fact. What drives me, going back to an example that Wesley brought up about hedonism, is that I lived a very hedonistic life when I was growing weed. I was in the weed industry here in California for fucking 15 years, growing weed out of my house for 11 under the radar. And this was before I became a dad. This is before I got sober. This was before so many things, right? And I was living that life, just making money hand over fist. I was, making 6 figures from home before everyone else was when they were doing the remote shit, right? And that was a painful existence.
Mm.
After a while, that was a painful existence, because what was going on is I was pleasure seeking, and then the pain came.
Mm.
What I mean by that, think of it this way. When you go out drinking, no one ever calls you up and says, hey, let's go work on a hangover. No one ever fucking says that. No one ever says, let's get a bunch of cocaine and booze so we can feel like shit the next day. That sounds awesome, bro. Let's go. No one ever says that. What do people say? They say, let's go out and party. Let's hang out. Let's have a great time. Maybe we'll get some phone numbers, maybe whatever. But we never talk about the hangover. Okay. So the hedonistic life, there is a hangover. There is going to be some type of payment that is going to be due. So then at one point I had to change that script around, where I was like, you know what? Fuck that. I got to get strong and healthy again. I still got plenty of life in me. I've seen too many friends keep going down this path and die, or live a living death, which is worse. And so now, through essentially this vision that I have for myself in the future, and this is how I want to. This is how I see myself, as this badass 80-something-year-old man who is running fucking circles around his younger self and younger dudes, and just an inspiration to younger men. And who's still physically fit, still fucking active, still doing what he loves to do. And in order for me to have that now, to experience that now, because it can't be this thing where it's like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, once I get there, I will be. No. I need to be there now. Meaning here and here, and doing the things that I do to get me to that place where I feel that I've accomplished that already. And I just keep doing it. Favorite Zen story. There is a young monk hanging out with an older monk. And the young monk asks the senior monk, he says, Roshi, how long must we practice Zazen? And Roshi looks at him and says, till the day you die. There is no end goal. There is no end point. This is, people refer to this, the infinite game, right? And then I've heard entrepreneurship being referred to as the infinite game, which I was like, hey, that's great. I love that. I love infinite games. This is awesome, because we're finite beings. We're finite beings. And here's where the contradiction arises when people talk shit about other people who are older, saying you're out of time. And it's like, well, how the fuck are you out of time if you're playing the infinite game? And then here's the other part too. How the fuck much time do you think you have anyways? I have no idea. Just because you're younger in the chronological order of things, or older in the chronological order of things, does that equate to? Yes, we can probably look at insurance actuary tables that show you, oh, these are the odds of you dying. Okay, cool. Those are the odds. Thanks. But guess what? I'm always going to play against the odds, baby. That's just how it goes, right?
Yeah.
And so if we are finite beings, which we are, playing an infinite game, which if we're into sales and business and entrepreneurship, which that is, and even I would say even on the creative side of things, if you're a creative and you're doing cool shit, content, whatever, comic books, stories, art, music, doesn't matter. That's also an infinite game. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, let's embrace it and not necessarily have this irrational fear of, well, I might die. It's like, yeah, no, actually, there ain't no might. You will. The issue is I mean, if you want to make it an issue, is when. And since you don't know when is going to happen, why even worry about it?
Yeah.
Well, just to put a bow on that, because I think the key thing to realize is because we're going to die, our life is made up of like a finite amount of experiences, right? That we can cash out our chips on, and like Marco was saying, like, yes, you could put all your chips on the table and say, fuck it, let's live that hedonistic life, and that's where you get your core values, because you're like, that's kind of what you're optimizing for. But then you have to kind of pay the tab at the end, versus trying to figure out a life to where you can maximize those moments. Because and Sam Harris talks about this all the time, is like, the only thing we have is this moment, right? Like we could have like a nuclear bomb right now and just go off and we're done. or like we could have an electrical EMP thing and we lose our power, and in 2 weeks we're all starved to death and die. Like how would we know that like we have another 5 or 10 or 50 years, right? So I think that's where the becoming goals come into play, is like um everybody comes to different conclusions on what makes an optimal life or whatever. But I think the common thing is like figuring out how to optimize whatever this weird experience that we have called life, whatever this gift is that we have. How can we like optimize it to where we're as present and as grateful as we can be in this moment? And I think that's where you get like a core value like mine, which is like gratefulness, right? Like,
Mhm.
because gratefulness allows you to be present. It allows you to appreciate what you have in this moment, because you might not have another moment, and then you can kind of just build off of that. So I think that's important too. And you were talking about like the targets, and how it's more of like a process and not so much like an end goal. And it reminded me of like perfectionism, because that's kind of a trap where you're like, all right, well, what's like the perfect life and all
Mhm.
the ducks in a row and everything. But if you try to like plan for that,
Yeah.
you fuck up the moments that you do have, right? Like
Mhm.
we all have those experiences where we're like, damn, I should have had more time with my uncle, right? Who passed away, or I should have done this. And you were so caught up in the bullshit of like thinking across the pond, across the hill of
Mhm.
what's going to come tomorrow, instead of just being present, right? And being grateful. So
Well, isn't
I think
that
that's
isn't that
important
an
too.
interesting paradox right there, though? What you bring up, and this is something that I struggle with constantly, is this thing that you just brought up, where it's like, number one, why are we doing any of this? Why are we in sales, right? And then typically, here's the trope behind that is this, is that it's one of the highest paying careers that you could get into, for lack of a better term. Let's just call it that, right? It's one of the highest paying, and it's an entryway into entrepreneurship. It's an entryway into all these things where you can make a lot of money. So, from my perspective, why did I get into sales? Because I fucked up my old life, which I'm glad, because I'm here now, which is much better. But the idea is to make a shit ton of money. Why do I want to make a shit ton of money? Because I got people that I want to take care of. I got aging family members, and I've got young family members, right? So now I'm in the middle. All right. Now here's the thing. If I'm lucky enough to be on a deathbed, to actually have a deathbed, let's say I don't die in a car accident or some weird fucking situation, right? Like I'm at some S&M club or something, I die of a heart attack, which wouldn't be a bad thing. No, just kidding. But this constant, well, we got to plan ahead, put shit in your calendar, because if it's not in your calendar, you're probably not going to make it happen. It's not going to happen, right? But then also not to die with these potential regrets where I shouldn't have spent so much time in the office, even though we're working our
Mhm.
asses off getting after it.
Mhm.
So it's this very strange balancing act where it's like, well, fuck. If I was that dude who was like, man, I don't want to be that dude on my deathbed with any regrets, going like, I should have spent more time with my son. So maybe I should just really just say, you know what? I'm done with sales, guys, because it's just such a fucking grind. I'm just gonna go get a 9 to 5 job, to where I know from like 8 to 4, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. That's it. I got my bennies. Yeah, I'm barely scraping by, but now I get to see my son every day and blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
But will I be fulfilled? Will I
Mhm.
ultimately be happy? Will I be feeling that I'm living my life purpose?
Yeah.
Well, and seeing your son and having all those experiences is off of the back of you doing all this work and being able to like give him a better life, because I know that that's part of your goal. So you gotta weigh it all out and be like, all right, across time. I think that's what I meant more so, is like when I'm present and I'm not in the moment, that's what I regret. If I'm
Mm,
present and I'm doing my
mm,
work and I'm like, hey, I'm doing this for a good worthy end, and I die, I'll be like, you know what? I don't have any regret. Like I did everything I could in my power to like be in this moment and do the best I can and be the best man I can. It's more so those opportunities where we're looking past the moment and not
Mhm.
just in the moment, that I think is where the regret comes from, at least for me. But
Yeah.
you were saying, Marco, just real quick, and then I'll pass it back to Dave. Sorry, Dave. Because I really want to say this, because I was thinking about this the other day. Um, like Andrew Tate, very controversial dude, but he did say this one thing that caught me because he was talking to some streamer kid and he's like, well, if all you want to do is pursue happiness, right? And happiness is your end goal. Drugs make you happy, right? Sex makes you happy. You know, you could do all this stuff that makes you happy. So if you're optimizing for the emotion of I want to feel happy, you could get those hits in many different ways. What if you optimized for pride and you wanted to like make yourself proud? Well, then you would wake up early because it makes you proud of yourself. You would put the work in when no one else is because it makes you proud of yourself. And then I was listening to Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about of all the emotions that supersede everything else, if you were to extract it, the thing that's at the bottom of the barrel, that makes everything else kind of come together. It's obviously love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm thinking about a life that's worth living, for me, it like shoots out of that like love emotion and like the people in my life, because I think like the relationships are like the only thing that we're really going to have at the end of the day that we'll never get back, like if that goes away. So I think that's important too, is like this experience on earth, but also our relationship with other people and our experience with them, I think are the things that are probably the most valuable if you were to like extract everything out of
Yeah. It's
Well,
interesting.
it's all of it, man. That's the thing. It's all of it. It's all of it. It's all of it. Because right now what we're doing is we're kind of teasing and picking and pulling things from this whole grand thing. I'm listening to this book, Outlive by Peter Attia. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Peter Attia. Anyways, he's this medical doctor, and he's he's written this book, and it's talking about medicine 3.0. Now, medicine 1.0 is ancient Greeks and all that stuff. Medicine 2.0 is the standard model that we've been dealing with now for like 150 years, where it's like, oh, you'll have diabetes. Well, this is it. And oh, you'll have cancer. You know, like that. Medicine 3.0 is looking at everything. You know, your exercise, your sleep, your food, what are you doing, your genetics, all this other stuff, right? And so we can't isolate just this one thing and say it's this, right? And so I think in a similar way with this conversation that we're having, is that yes, we can look at the individual components and attributes, but everything affects everything. Spiderweb. Spiderweb's a great example of a great analogy, right? When you look at a beautifully crafted spiderweb and you got the morning dew on it and you see it from the right angle and it's just fucking gorgeous, right? And as soon as a little fucking fly lands in any little part, it just affects the whole thing. And the spider's like, oh shit, there's my lunch, right? And so the same thing with just everything that we're bringing up. There's never going to, there's never going to be just this one thing, because I think it all affects everything. Going back to what you were saying about what core values is, the person that I am striving to be on a daily, the core values that I assign to myself are the ones that are going to help me achieve that state of being, if you will, for lack of, I think that's the best way to put it, is that state of being, not necessarily like the person, but it's more like a state of being, right? Because it's this very active thing. It's not static. And I think the same way, I think core values are something that are very active in some sense. They're not necessarily living things, but there are things that in some sense we put energy towards to guide us, to help propel us. And then Wesley, going back to what you were saying about love, I think love is a very important thing. This concept of whether it's an emotion, whether it's an act, right? Because it's I think it's still debatable as far as what is love. We can have a whole fucking other episode talking about love and each individual's experience on that. But as far as, you know, just basic, like, okay, who is this? Do I have enough love for myself to get up in the morning to do these things? Do I have enough love for the other people? You know, where is it coming from? What's it motivated by? However, I know I'm rambling a little bit, so I apologize.
So good. Yeah, no, it's all good. I think you're right. I think just to touch on a few of those, with the love, like I think, is it the Greeks that have like 7 different words for it, for different types of love and things like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think you're right. I think there's lots of different parts to that. I'm always skeptical whenever Hollywood pushes a meaning of something itself. So, you know, the love that every Disney film teaches you and stuff, it's like probably not that one, right? But what's I think A couple like yeah, one of the things was the buckets. In Driven, he talks about having the different 6 different buckets: family, fun, finances, all that type of stuff. Cliche self-help stuff, right? But I think what it was interesting with that was he said each bucket doesn't have to have the same amount in for it to be full. And I think it was like, so sometimes like talking about should I be working hard or should I be with my son or should I be doing this or should I be doing that? It was more like that's the balance. It's not like there is a should. It's like if you need fun, like if you have to have dopamine hits and you have to do adrenaline junkie stuff, find a way to do that just enough to fill that bucket for you in a monthly basis, but balance it out with your family. So it's like if you just need to go skydiving once a month with your mates, like this was kind of the idea. It's like as long as your wife knows that and she understands that why you're doing that is to fill that bucket so that when you're with her, you're not wishing you were there. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They just go, oh, this has to be full. And then you try and fill every bucket equally, and then you just can't. You can't do that. Like you just physically
Yeah,
can't, right? Like you
yeah,
can't do all that. So that's really
yeah.
no, that sort of stuff's really interesting for me. One thing I want to bring this back to though, just for the sake of this episode, because we could go, I've got a feeling we could just talk for hours on this. Um, if we were bringing this back to a sales or business or that type of sort of scenario now, um, what would your guys' advice be on people trying to create maybe their core values or their or doing their belief system? So that would kind of be my first question. The second one would be how do we help people, for a lot of people who are probably at least I'm connected to, their type of sale is overcoming a lot of core values or limiting beliefs in people to help them make a better decision. How would you give advice to someone who's trying to help someone get around that on a call? Because I think that's an interesting topic as well.
First thing that pops up into my mind was this one concept that gets constantly talked about is one's why.
Mm.
Why? Why are we doing what we're doing? Again, going back to that. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why have you chosen this path? Why do you want to keep persisting when it's difficult? And then understanding that once you have a very clear why, okay, then going into the next part where it's like, okay, well, what do you think needs to change in order for you to be able to create and have this why or fulfill on this why of yours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I
it's
think
reverse engineering, right?
so. I want to dig deeper on that because for me, I don't know what this is, but I really dislike going with the flow of things. Like if someone says something and it's kind of like a cliche, like I really struggle to say it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I know that the why is so important, but I also feel it's been misrepresented in different ways. What do you think of when you're thinking of someone's why?
This is something that Wesley and I have been talking about more and more as of late. And oh boy, this comes up for me quite a bit where it's like, what sort of audacity is, I mean, how audacious of us as sales reps to think that within a 1 hour conversation that we can actually affect someone's mindset so much so that then they're going to succeed in the thing that they're wanting to purchase and continually to succeed with that. That's the issue that I've been struggling with right now, where I'm like, holy fuck. When we talk about it statistically across the board, the low success rate that people find on offers,
Mm-hmm.
why is that? Because of this shit. So in that moment, when you're having the conversation with somebody and you're getting them over the line, getting them over their fear, you have no fucking idea who this person is. You just met them. If you're on a one call process, like on most offers, and you have anywhere between a half hour to 45 minutes to essentially influence, persuade, convince, and I went specifically in that order as far as the order of I guess ethical ethics, right? Where it's more ethical to be influential as opposed to convince, right? To twist their arm into buying to make them feel guilty. So somehow within this hour-long conversation. We've become Tony Robbins and Carl Jung and fucking Jordan Peterson, and somehow within our own fucked up lives, we are being congruent with this person. And all of a sudden now it's like, cool, dude, guess what? You're enlightened and now you're ready to purchase this thing. I got a little cynical there. I did. And I want to bring it back because that question you asked is fucking huge. You know, it is not something that I'm like, oh, here's the definitive answer on that. Fuck no, man. Because I'm still batting that around going like, wait a minute. And keep in mind, I'm only like 2 years in the scene going into my third. So I might be missing something here, but from the little that I've experienced on other offers, and when I reflect back on the conversations that I've had with people and the type of mindsets that they have, and knowing how long it takes to cultivate and change a mindset, it's not just something that's gonna. Yeah, go ahead.
This is going back to perfectionism, right? It's like I think like, do you need to have this overarching grand why to like take action and improve consistently across time? No, I think the why is like discovered. I think it's like a journey that you like discover it as you kind of reveal to yourself. It's like a self-revelation and like a journey. And so my why is gonna be totally different than your guys' why, right? And I think something else to really consider here is I used to work construction with guys that are still working there today and happy, right? And I wasn't. And so I talked to my friend Kevin, who also left, and he's doing real estate and stuff, and he's crushing it. Some people don't think about the things that we're thinking right now, and they probably never will, right? Like we always used to say, like the puppy dog syndrome or something, where it's like you're just happy, you just don't know what you don't know, right? You didn't open that Pandora's box. So like, is it worth exposing people to questioning their reality and going down this weird rabbit hole if they're not actually engaging in it themselves? They don't want to do it. And so I think as far as the prospect, like if they don't already have that thought process going, then it's probably a good sign that they're not a good fit. Because it's like, yeah, you don't want to go down this journey. You don't want to go down this path of like losing yourself and then having to find it and pick up from the rubble. As far as me and how I figure out my why and stuff, I think just like you were saying, it's similar to, you mentioned the why, right, Marco, and it reminded me of Tony Robbins because he actually was a sales guy when he started, and now he kind of helps people like figure out their shit. And I think it's the same process that we bring people through on the calls that influences them to make a change that we should do on ourselves, because that's what Tony teaches. And that is to get basically clarity, but also to discover like kind of like your reasons for doing things. And like I said, I think that's kind of like a self-revelation. I think the most important thing is like, are you on that journey or are you not? Right? Like, because everybody is going to be different. For the guy that's content and happy at construction, it might be like, hey, I figured out a savings plan that's going to set my family up for retirement, and I can retire at 65, and we're budgeting this month and things like that. And for me, I deal with severe depression and things like that. So like the demons that I have to overcome just to get at like base level are a lot different than other people. So I think it's really just a matter of like, are you on a hero's journey for yourself? Are you on a self-transformation journey where you're trying to ask these questions and pursue it and discover, right? Like I wouldn't think of it as like your why. I would think of it almost like try to be like a scientist and just like see, like try to like ask the question like you're Sherlock Holmes, like what would make my life compelling? And I think as you explore that and as you like just act in the world, you'll like stumble across upon that. That's at least how I did it. I didn't have this like perfect why perfectionist thing. And then I started taking action because that kept me stuck and paralyzed for like 4 years where I just sat around, did nothing, right? Because I didn't know. So
Yeah,
I think that's part of it.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's like it's such a buzzword that's thrown about, and it's all thanks to Simon Sinek, right? Like the know your why. But I think it's like, I think, yeah, I just don't think enough people actually understand what they're trying to do, and then that's why we have weird moments in the industry where there's people who like you can sell like any offer and things like that, but like is then you've got to work out your own kind of belief system on, am I just helping them through the door? If they don't stick it out, that's their fault, not mine. Or is it like you caused them to need to buy it because of how you talk to them, and now you've left them on their own? Like, it's a really interesting, it's a little, I honestly, I feel like this industry has become very it's very religious, is how I would look at it, which is why we end up
Yeah.
with we end up with cults,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Like,
mhm, mhm.
there's not many people who are in every camp. And what I mean by that is, maybe they support most different sales trainings out there. Like, if we just take one example, right? You're either in one camp or you're in the other. And it's
Yeah.
like this polarizing religious sect thing. And I think that's a bit of a human psychology thing. I don't think that's necessarily the industry itself. I think that's what we need. We need to belong, and we found that in these ways. But it's really funny that that's such a thrown around word. Find out their why. And I asked it, and three different salespeople who are fairly successful in what they do and been doing it for a few years, we can have like a 10-minute conversation about what the word even means. It
Yep.
just shows that, like, buzzwords, there's a lot more to them. You know what I mean? And it's
Well, yeah,
I just find that really interesting because,
that was a really good point. Really,
you know, yeah.
Socrates would have a fucking field day with that question. He would have a fucking field day. He'd be like, "Cool. What do you mean by why?"
Hmm.
Just like how a fucking like a 6 year old is always why. Well,
Hmm.
why on the why, and why on the why?
Yeah.
And it's just like, holy fuck.
but we do
Yeah.
have a why, even if we don't realize it. Now that I'm thinking about it, because like, what's my why for doing this? Well, you asked me, and I'm out of respect and things like that. So that's like my small why. And then why am I eating lunch? Well, because I'm hungry. And then what's the overarching why I don't have one? Well, that is your why. Your why is that you're just existing this
Yeah.
hedonistic lifestyle that you don't realize.
Well, what
And
what
so
what I think is it comes right back down to the very start of this conversation, right? I know you could go as far as saying there is no why, except that you just decided it. Right now, it goes levels, but if we can decide our core values, and our core values dictate why we're doing something, why did we pick those core values? Really? Because we felt like it, right? Or you were indoctrinated with it, which you didn't choose. That's one,
yeah,
right?
you have a belief. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've chose that belief, right? And that's what we're saying. Like, so ultimately, like, if you go enough whys, because I've also heard it's not why, it's who. So it's better to figure out who you want to be than why. But then you go, but why do you want to be that who? And then it's like, well, and eventually it's just like, so it's like, I think, I don't know, maybe if I guess not everyone thinks about it as deep as we do, right? Like, that's that's one. But like, if we're ever struggling with it, I wonder if it is enough. Is it, I guess this is a question we can kind of leave it with. It's not one to answer, I suppose, but is it enough to get someone's why, as in their initial knee-jerk why, go a layer or two deeper till they're kind of telling you who they want to be and their end goals? And then if this is the first step or a step on that journey, is that just enough? Like, we don't need to go deeper with them. We don't need to know, because I said when I sell some of the stuff I sell, like, one of the offers I'm on is helping people start a marketing agency. One of the things I go, look, trust me, I know at 4 years old, no one was going, my goal is to start a marketing agency,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But maybe their goal is they want to have some financial income right now that out earns something so they can look after a loved one. And in a year's time, they never touch the agency again. Is that enough? Is that okay? Rather than us going, well, does this hit their why? And I think I
Hmm.
struggle with it because I want to know my why that deep. But
Hmm.
like you
Yeah.
said, Wesley, like, most people don't even think about that. Is it enough for us to not have to worry that far and just go,
Right.
this is a logical first step. It gets you one step closer to your why. That's enough for me to help you overcome whatever's holding you back.
Well, you pointed out a huge thing, which Mark and I talk about all the time, which is one of the reasons we started the podcast, because we're like, dude, we hate this like sales bro culture where everyone thinks they have this God complex. And I think that's part of it, is like this weird God complex where we have to like figure out everyone's reason for existence. Instead of just like, I think in the sales context, it's like your why should be the reason that compels you to change. So like when you find that, at least for me, you get into pain, right? It's like that's the core philosophy of like something that's unsettling enough friction for someone to be like, I need to get out of that. And so I think if you were to ask like a sales type of why, it would be like, or even just for yourself internally, like, are you satisfied with the life you have? If not, why are you not satisfied? Dig into that. Why is it
Mhm.
painful? And then if you can get enough of a pain to compel you to move forward, that is
Mhm.
kind of your why. I want to have a better life because of this. So I think it stems from not from what we want to pursue, but what we're trying to shed our exoskeleton out of, kind of, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. And
Mhm.
then it's kind of like at least for me, right? I don't know what your experience is like, but for me, I have like a lot of demons where I'm like, dude, I either die or I just
Mhm.
conquer these demons and come out the other side. So for me,
Yeah.
it's all about getting past that suffering, to me
Well,
at
well,
least.
well, dude, what you bring up, and this is Albert Camus, philosopher. He was an existentialist philosopher. Brought the idea of absurdism into the game, as far as this whole existence is absurd, right? There's no meaning to it except for the one that you create, which is very in line with existentialism. One of his best quotes, one of the greatest quotes that he has, is like, before any other philosophical issue can be resolved, we must first figure out the issue around suicide. And what he means by that is this: it's like, give me a reason why I shouldn't kill myself now.
Mhm.
Because that's like the
Because that
end
is
of all
that
those
is
discussions.
yeah, that
Like,
is
well,
the
why not
end.
just take it out? Why not just shut it
Why
down?
not just end it right now? It's like, what's, I mean, you're gonna fucking die anyway, so why not just fucking do it now? Right. And
And that
that is
always goes, for me, it always goes to, well, there's people in my life that would suffer, that would be hurt if I did that. And that's
right.
like the one thing. So that's why I went to love and relationship. Again,
Interesting.
it's a Pandora's box with all this
It
weird
is.
For sure.
Interestingly, the Driven book, I know I've mentioned it a lot, but he actually talks about that as well. He says for a lot of people in that sort of boat, that is our go-to. Like,
Mhm.
I get to the point where I just want to I want to off myself.
Yeah.
And then he's working with a psychologist, and the psychologist, when anyone ever comes to him and says that, and goes, "Great, cool, at least we can start again." And he looks at it as a different way, and they look at it as the inside world and the outside world. There is no difference, and if you want to kill yourself, there's actually, if you oh, you guys need to read that one, I think, because he talks about if you want to kill yourself, it's, I might not quote it actually because I'm going to mess it up, but basically he talks about the fact that there is a reason that you're not aligned with where you're wanting to go. And he's like, you should kill yourself because yourself isn't who you are. That's a preconceived idea that you've built or been instilled. So let's wash that out and let's start again. And then it kind of comes right back around to the core values and everything again. So it's a really interesting
yeah,
full
kill your ego
circle.
or whatever, but not your
Yeah, yeah.
actual.
He's like, you should kill yourself, but not your body. And it's a really interesting take.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
obviously, it's obviously used as a little bit of a, oh, like that's kind of a harsh like way to go about it, but that's interesting. Well, that's a good full circle, I think. I think that's a
We
decent
covered
start.
suicide, sales, fucking bow and arrows.
Yeah, it's just what happens in a normal sales conversation, isn't it? Isn't that what you guys talk about with your
All the
prospects? And
time.
then they just pay you 10 grand, right? Like that's how.
Yeah, easy peasy. Just bam, around the table.